Okay, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Good morning. If you are in the United States, good evening. If you are elsewhere, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And thank you so much for GMAT Club for asking me to come back. I love doing these sessions. What we are going to do today is we are going to review 3 different resumes from business school candidates. And I've got them here live with me today, so we'll be able to, keep this interactive and ask questions back and forth. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to try to spend about 15 minutes or so on each one, give or take. And then we will open it up to questions at the end if we have any time remaining. Super quick. Just to remind you of who I am in case you have not seen me or heard of me before, my name is Maria Wich-Vila. I'm a 2005 graduate of Harvard Business School, and I am the founder of ApplicantLab.com, which is the online consulting platform that replaces the need for those really super expensive admissions consultants. I don't think you need to pay for them because I think you can teach yourself how to be your own admissions consultant, and that's what I do on ApplicantLab.com. So with that out of the way, we've got our 3 people here today. We've got a filmmaker. We have a person who works for a chemical company, and we have someone who works for a unicorn-ish engineering company. So the order that we're going to go in today is we're going to do the film creative person first, then the person working in the chemicals industry, and then followed by the Indian engineer working for the large software unicornish space. So the last time I did this, I used sort of like pseudonyms. But everyone here today is very brave, and they're fine with me using their real names, which is good, but it's also bad because I didn't take the time to memorize your names because I was like, I don't need it. All right, but so with that out of the way, we're going to start with Amit Pandey, who is Mr. Film. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'm going to pull up his resume right now. And entire screen share. Okay, film person resume. Can you guys tell me verbally if you see the resume up on the screen?
Yep, I see it. I see it on the screen.
Okay, excellent, thank you. All right, so Amit, why don't, before we sort of dive into the resume and I start going through it, do you want to introduce yourself and sort of give a quick sense of your background, or I can also just jump in, whatever you prefer.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Amit, and I'm a filmmaker, and that's what I've been doing from last 7 years. And right now, I decided to go for an MBA, and that's how I ended up researching about all the schools, the essays, and the resume. That's why we all are here today, and seeking help from Maria today to craft the beautiful essay, because all this work is done by me. So I thought, I can take some help from Maria and we can go ahead. That's about me. I'm based out of Bangalore. And my target schools is Tuck, Darden, and UCLA. So that's about it, Maria.
All right, sounds great. Well, thank you so much for that. So it's, you have a pretty interesting background because you are both creative and business at the same time, right? Like you were doing the filmmaking stuff, but you also started your own company to do productions. It looks like you've done short films, TV episodes. You've done a variety of different content, but so you're not just on the.
Hi Maria, sorry to interrupt. This is Abhijit. Can you please zoom in a bit?
Yes. You know what? I am totally going to do that in a second. I just had this up for to give the overall impression, and then we're going to zoom in and go line by line.
All right, sounds good.
Excellent. I guess you might not be able to see this, but what I'm trying to convey from this sort of the overall resume is that you're not just like on the business side of film, and you're not just the camera guy. Like you're between these 2 realms, which I think is really interesting, and it's relatively unique, right? When I went to business school, there was someone there who was a producer who had been a film producer. There was someone else who had been an actress, and then there were people like me. I used to work on the business side of television. My husband used to work on the business side of movies. So we all sort of came together in business school. But so you've got this kind of unique balance with what you've done. Now, one of the things that was a little bit tricky for me to understand at first was that at first I was a little bit confused in that I started reading the resume at the top and I saw, okay, so you started your film company in 2015 and you're still doing it. And then I started sort of zooming down and I saw, wait a minute, now you also have this other thing from 2018 to present, and then you have this other company from 2019 to present. And at first glance, because I'm skimming the resume at first, as most people do, I was like, wait a minute, are these like 3 different companies? And the resume is supposed to be in reverse chronological order. So these other, the Filmco Academy, which was from last year, that should be the first job. So it took me a few sort of seconds to sort of read even more deeply and be like, oh, I get it. He started the big company and then he launched sort of subdivisions or sub companies within that big company umbrella. But since it didn't really hit me at first, because I, like all admissions officers or all admissions people, I don't have like 3 hours to relax, and go through your resume with, I've got like 15 minutes, right? For the whole application. So that was something that right off the bat, I was like, oh, this is a little bit confusing because so one of the first things I'm going to suggest is that at the top where you have this like little paragraph where you say India's leading production house that produces diverse and captivating photos. I think what you might want to do is you could say maybe where it says like Filmco Productions, Filmco Films, and Filmco Academy, you could put here like founded 2018, and then Filmco Academy, founded 2019 or launched in 2019 or what have you. And then instead of necessarily, like I wouldn't necessarily format these as though they were separate jobs, because I think that's part of what threw me off, was that it was formatted like it was a job. So I was like, whoa. So he's got these other jobs, but then, there was the few moments of just like complete confusion of like, why are these in this order? It should, this academy should be the first thing because it's the most recent thing, right? So anyway, I would remove the formatting in terms of, so this stuff here where it says like Mumbai 2018 to present, if we convey at the very top that you founded these different divisions during this certain years, then what I would do is I would then make these, just don't quite position them as, I would put it more like this. I would do it more like, instead of having it be the job title first, followed by the name of the company, it's almost like you would do something more like this. So then that way you make it clear that this isn't a separate job per se. It's just all under that same big umbrella. The second part was that I noticed that you had, you've got these buckets, right? You've got the sort of the creative bucket here. So we start off with, you immediately start with the creative experience. I'm a photographer and I'm a film guy. And then you have the business experience as the owner and manager of the company. Since this is an application to business school, I am going to have you put the business experience first, because they are not the job, the quote unquote job that an admissions committee is hiring you for is not the job of, boy, we really need a wedding photographer to come and be a member of our MBA class, right? What they're asking themselves is, we're looking for future business leaders who are going to go on into the business world and make us proud because we are a business school. So I want you to emphasize those business elements first, as opposed to just like, because otherwise then the first thing I see is filmmaker and I'm like, oh my gosh, a photographer, like how's this person going to make money? Like how, oh no, if we let them in, are they just going to, what job are they going to get? Like, McKinsey's not going to hire a photographer, right? Or they might, but it's unlikely. So the first thing I did, or I think you should do, is, apart from the other first thing I just talked about before, which was sort of, elaborate, putting the dates up here, right. Put the business experience first, right? Really sort of emphasize that. And I think one of the other things that was a little bit, kind of gave me some pause was that you said, well, you said that your company is India's leading production house. And it's not clear to me, like, what, making a claim like that, on the one hand, like, it shows great confidence. But on the other hand, it might also risk backfiring in that if somebody goes to Google and was like, that's India's leading, okay, well, let me go to Wikipedia and see, like, who are India's largest film production companies? Is your company going to show up in that list? In like
on the second page, yes. On the Google, on the second page, yes.
Second page, okay, but certainly not the first page. So if as an admissions person, if they even were to do this, they wouldn't go all the way to the second page. So I think you
Right.
need to say, you need to be more specific, because otherwise what happens is that if you say it's the leading production company, and I go to Wikipedia or Google and it's like, no, the leading production company in India is actually something else, then it's like, oh, it kind of damages your credibility. So if you're like the 7th largest or the 8th or the 12th or the 15th, that's fine. India's a huge country and Bollywood is enormous. So,
Right.
but I'd rather have you be accurate than try to exaggerate, because it may come across as if though you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. So I would be more precise with your language there. I would also love to know a little bit more, instead of saying like content that do whatever clients need them to do, I think we can just say captivating video content and leave it at that. But I want to have a sense of like how many employees, like down here, you say you oversee 30 staff. But so is that just for the core film co, or is that across all of the divisions, including the academy?
That's just for the film. So the total employees are 68.
Perfect. So I want the summary stuff, since now how we're going to position this is more as an umbrella experience. The top, I want, almost 70 employees. If you can divulge any, again, maybe it's just a matter of saying something like, we're the 8th largest or the 15th largest or the 20th largest company. And if you can also summarize up here, instead of summarizing fashion, films, wedding, advertisements, I don't care so much what the different genres are, but I definitely want to know, like, well, how many movies, how many TV shows, right? Because down here you've got we're working with brands like Netflix and Hotstar and BBC Earth and Nat Geo. And so how can you summarize for me, like, we have worked on 16 different TV shows, and the parentheses like documentaries, reality shows, 7 different feature films. Like, can you sort of bucket those things together? I launched an academy in 2019 that has already served 100 students. Stuff like that to sort of make that introductory paragraph be the overview of the full business. And then I drill into the details underneath.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So then, one thing that was a little bit interesting to me was like, wow, this person they founded the company. It's sort of, there's 2 different offices. And all this stuff is happening. And then this is so minor. But then it was like, I managed the social media accounts. Like, on the one hand, that's great that you grew it to 35,000 followers. Although in a country like India, I have no sense of whether or not 35,000 followers is a big deal or not a big deal, because India's got 1 billion people in it. So I guess it's good. But this bigger question is, if he's really the CEO, how does he have time to manage the Twitter account, right? Why haven't you hired someone to do, because the social media stuff is normally, I get it because I'm a solopreneur, so so that was sort of like, like for someone who's like doing this huge stuff up here to also be like managing the LinkedIn account or the whatever, like that just was sort of a moment of like, I don't know that that's really like a big thing that matters to me. So it was almost like, well, if he's really such a busy and important CEO, how does he have time for this? So you might want to consider maybe not getting rid of it, but maybe if you do you have a marketing staff or anyone on your team that is also helping with this? Or no, it's just you?
Yes, absolutely. So I have a dedicated marketing team, but I have to, because being a photographer, whatever gets out to the social media, I have to keep an eye on that, and for that reason, I mentioned that.
Sure, but you're also, as the owner of the company, you have to keep an eye on everything that comes out of every division of your company. So I would just say something like, you could say something like, perhaps somewhere in here, you could say something like, the company, the film company has, a marketing team of 4, oversee or, lead a marketing team of 4 to grow social media by 800% in 2 years or something. Right. So that way it's clear that you are not the one going in every day and like Twitter.
Understood. Okay. That's a very, very important point.
All right. So then you've got the films and you acquired 30K in additional funding. So yeah, so I think for some of these, I want to know, you list like, oh, you've got all these different clients, right? You've got Amazon, Netflix, Flipkart, Uber. So again, this is where I think a summary, if it doesn't go up above, then putting it here. Like, I've worked with 10 major companies, such as Amazon, I've recorded 70 different commercials for them. And if you could say, you say that you acquired 30K in initial funding, you don't have to tell me here on this video, but if the division is profitable, or if it's paid back those initial funders, or if it's now generating significantly more revenue than that 30K, like if you're going to disclose for me the funding, if it's also then been a successful division financially, I would like for you to also disclose that. Because when you just say, well, we acquired some funding, but then there's nothing else, I'm just like, well, is it not profitable yet? It's still sort of okay. And then similarly, the point I made with the leading thing before is the same thing here. You started this this school of photography and filmmaking, or this sort of academy, again, but you launched it last year. And so you're like, oh, it's South India's leading school for photography and filmmaking. And even if that is true, it just, do you see how it sort of makes me go like, really? Come on, guy.
Yeah, it conflicts.
Yeah, it sounds like you're lying, right? Like, I don't know how else to put that. And I get it. A lot of people want to, because it's like, oh, it's business school. It's so competitive. But it's better to just be like, maybe you say it's South India's first business school, or fastest business school, film school. It's South India's, you can tell what field I work in. It's South India's fastest growing. Like, it's already in only 18 months of operation has quickly become the most popular. Things like that. So state things like that definitely put it in a good light, but that don't make it sound like you're sort of making things up.
Right.
Okay. And then you also have, on top of all this, you've also started a wedding blog and directory and an AI matchmaking app. And I think this is interesting because they're both, wedding planning and matchmaking are, different parts of the same spectrum. And so I thought that was a really interesting, what's in, it's here, you should almost, first of all, I should say other organizations, plural, because it's been two. It's almost like you should follow the same, see how here you've got this in like bold, blah, blah, blah. But then down here for these two companies that you started, it's kind of like small, it's not in bold, you're sort of underlining it. So I would keep the formatting the same. And you might even want to say something like, you could almost break it out into its own section. You could almost call this, and I don't know for sure. I know you're trying to get an application in today. So, but you could almost, if you wanted to, there's a version of this where you could call this like primary experience, or you could call this like, maybe like main experience, or you just call this experience. And then you do this exact same thing where you've got this line and the same thing, and you break it out. Where do I want to put this? I want to put this right here, because I really think it's cool that on top of everything else that you've done, you've also, something like other entrepreneurial experience, right? That might not be the best wording, but something here to visually highlight, because by the time I get down here at this part of the page, I'm already like, yeah, okay, I get it. He has a film company, they do commercials, they do TV shows, and now he's teaching people. Okay, fine. Right? And so at this point, I don't want the reader to skip over these kind of cool other things that you've done. I want there to be almost like a visual stop sign to be like, okay, hold on. You've seen the film things, you know what I'm doing there. It's cool, but I'm also doing more. And this is different. It's not because I don't want them to sort of get like, yeah, okay, I get it, and then skip it. Because that's just human nature. Right? When you're reading something or skimming it and you're like, yeah, I know where this is going, you don't pay as close attention. So I don't know, I think it might be something. So then what I would do here is I would move this, the HP stuff, this was sort of like your old life, so you could sort of move these over here. Sorry, I just messed up your formatting by copying and pasting it, but you can fix that on your own. So yeah, you just have here like, oh, well, I started out my career doing HP stuff, but that's the old me. And then I would sort of break this out to really make it clear that you're doing this. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's absolutely makes sense.
I was like, he either disagrees with me so much that he can't even speak, or he's so wowed that he can't even speak. Okay, so this stuff down here though, you don't need to you can totally delete these lines of like, did you know that I'm good at filmmaking? Do you know that I have a certificate? Do you know that I'm actually good at Adobe Premiere? Like, of course you are. If you weren't good at filmmaking, you wouldn't be running a film company. So some of these other certifications and stuff, you can put them within the application form, perhaps. There might be a space. But I don't think that this adds a whole lot, just because, that may be the filmmaking one by VECC, though I've never heard of VECC, sorry, so I don't know if that's a big deal or not. But definitely the Adobe one Like, did you know that I know how to edit in Photoshop? I would hope so. You wouldn't be a very good photographer, or, if you didn't know the Adobe Creative Suite, you wouldn't be running a very good company probably. So it's a given, right? You don't need to explain things that are a given. Like, obviously you're good at Photoshop. Obviously you're good at whatever their film editing stuff is. Okay, and then all this other stuff I think is great. So I think the trick is, since now if we do it this way, it looks like it might be pushing us down onto the second page. It might be pushing us down onto the second page. If we have to get rid of stuff, what I would urge you to do is perhaps consider, removing some things that start to sound a little repetitive up here, right? So, and by the way, this one, where you say I'm leading up to 50 people, that should probably be the first thing that you put, because the leadership and management of others is a lot more relevant to a business school admissions committee than, my photograph was selected as the best wedding photograph of the year. Like, that stuff is nice, but from a business school's perspective, I'm not hiring you or letting you into my class because you're good at photography. I'm letting you into my class because you have experience managing teams of 50 people, right? So what I would do in the hours you have between now and you're submitting something today is go through, move whenever you can, prioritize. Like, for example, for this academy, if you, for example, you set up the academy. So like, if you hired 3 instructors and convinced 200 people to join, like anything related to the business side of it, put that first. And if you have to cut out a couple of the different, some of the different campaigns that you worked on, or, some of the photography, you know what I mean? Like, some of the more creative stuff, as cool as it is, you might have to sacrifice it to make room for the leadership piece. The final note I will say before I move on is, I would like to see if there's any point at all, because you said that you want to sort of move to the business side of film, or sort of a more businessy side of entertainment. That's why I would like to see even more of, like, if there's anything of like you managing the budget, or like you doing analytics. Like, I ran analytics for how our film performed. Well, Netflix, you can't do that for Netflix because they don't give you the numbers, but for some other, my husband works in the movie industry. I used to work in TV, so I'm very aware of Netflix. But some other, like, let's say you did some other platform, or you had some sort of a YouTube thing, or like if you ran any sort of analytics to try to optimize, researched something and did anything with numbers to crunch numbers to try to drive something you did in your business, I would like to see that, to give me the confidence that when you come to my business school, you're not going to be completely like, what's a spreadsheet? Right. And I'm going to drop out and I'm going to fail out because I don't understand spreadsheets and numbers scare me. Okay, so those were all of my comments, and I'm at the sort of 20-minute mark, which is sort of my upper limit. So do you have any sort of pressing question or comment, or?
Nothing as such, Maria. I'm audible, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, my only question is that can I mention my GRE score as well anywhere on the resume? Do you think that's right, or I should completely avoid that?
You don't have to, because it's going to be in the application form. Why waste precious space? Okay. On your resume? It's already crowded. If anything, we need to cut some stuff out. Why waste a line on something that they can easily see somewhere else in the application?
Perfect. Also, Maria, this the order of the job, as there are 3 startups working right now. My question was, how can we? I gave the most important business, the most important unit at the top. Do you think by not giving that, I'm taking their attention away to the thing where I don't want them to pay attention or something?
You put at the top the most important business unit. I think it's fine now, because if you're not putting the dates next to those business units, it won't confuse me and be like, wait, so right. How many companies worked at all these different companies, but some of them he started at another, that sort of moment of like, where I'm trying to get the overall picture of your candidate, of your professional experience. And I was like, he's had this job for 5 years, but he's also had this job for 1 year. He's also had another job. Because by putting it in that context, or that formatting, I thought it was a separate company, like a completely separate job at first. So I would put them in order of, first of all, anything businessy goes first, then the creative stuff, right? And then in terms of like,
thank you so much, Maria.
Put them in the order of importance. Okay, so now we are moving on to our Texas engineer. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself and your background, or we can just also jump right in if you'd
Gone
like.
again.
Sure. Yeah, I can give a quick background. My name is Brendan. I work currently, I'm a graduate of Texas A&M, an engineer. I work currently at a chemical company located in Texas. They're globally headquartered in Brussels, Belgium. But in this chemical company, I both lead the supply chain, the export fleet for our North American fleet, as well as I also was promoted semi-recently to lead digital strategy for virtual reality implementation, which was a benefit to a project I had run at the time. It was the first time we had ever brought in virtual reality, and they identified my expertise in the area, which was great. In addition, I also work a job at a startup management consulting firm. I lead the business development in North America for that startup firm. So that's an additional 30 hours a week I throw on the schedule. But it's been a great opportunity to kind of expand my expertise in sales. So it's been a good
Excellent.
experience.
So similar to what I just said to Amit, and we chatted about this a little bit before we went live. I thought that so what you're referring to is, so let's zoom out a little bit on the resume. So at the top, we have the current job that you had for about 2 years. Then you have this startup on the side that you talked about. And then you have what your first job out of college was. The issue is that similar to with the other one, when I was skimming, I was like, wait a minute, like how, because you sandwiched this within your full-time jobs, I was like, oh, this was some other job that he had. And he I was like, oh, it's kind of weird. Like I wrote this little comment here, like sort of jumping around in terms of function, which is like, sometimes it's good, but sometimes it could be a sign that like, maybe this guy doesn't know what he really wants to do, because he just I thought you were switching full-time jobs. So I was like, oh, so he spends a year as an engineer. He can't stand that. He moves to business development. He can't stand that. So then he moves back to supply. Like, I didn't want to give the impression that you were like this kind of like flaky, like, I don't like this, so I'll do this. Well, I don't like that either, so now I'll do something else. So I think it's important for a variety of reasons that, as with the other person, that we get rid of this. And I would almost you could put it under extracurricular. It's so funny. You could just call this also other. Like, I know that you're like, wow, other, that's a great word. But it really does, it's a very generic word, but it does kind of capture everything. And so I think you need to make it clear here, like Surgery Co. LLC, since I'd never heard of it because it's a small company, you could put here something like, you could put here an explanation, not in all caps, it's about to type in all caps, but something that explains like consulting firm in VR for doctors, right? Or whatever it is that it's doing. So then that way, first of all, you know what the company is doing. And then here, by calling yourself business development lead, that's another reason why I was like, oh, it's like he was a business development lead as a full-time job. So I think instead you should say here, like say something like business development lead, something like part-time, right? So then that way it's clear to the reader, like, oh no, this isn't like a full-time job, this is a separate thing. So then that way it becomes, you know what I mean? Like, it's clear to me, like, okay, it's not that he's totally flaky and he quits his job every, he can't decide what he wants to do with his life. And so he just keeps quitting his jobs.
Sure.
And so, yeah. And so you might even want to say, in one of these bullet points, you might even want to say something like, introduce the company, or something like decided to engage with company to expand my business development skills. And if you don't make that point in the resume, because it might be clunky, definitely make that point in either a main essay or in the optional essay. You can always explain the optional essay is your friend. So you can say, last year I started working with this, or actually, sorry, not last year, 6 months ago or 4 months ago, I started working with this blah, 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 to do this and blah, 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 and to expand my business development skill sets.
Of course, yeah. My applications go pretty in depth into how this opportunity was both presented and why I took it in tandem to my corporate role.
Perfect. Okay. So let's just visually make it, because the resume, they're going to read the resume before they read the essays. So sort of visually separate it. So now that we're here, so you have, some of these things are a little bit generic, right? Where it says, I led expansion of the business development and marketing strategy. I engage with the C-suite. brokered a partnership with a high, I guess you mean high technology company with high technology firm. I think, is there a word missing? I'm not sure. But so I would much rather see if you could give me any numbers at all. And I know you've just been there for 4 months, but anything at all of like, you know, leading business development and marketing for this new firm, have already reached out to 30 prospective clients, gotten 26, I've already landed 26 sales meetings. 24 of them are in process. 2 of them have already closed. Like, if you can give any sort of quantification to this engagement, and if you can't, that's fine, right? Because you've only been there for 4 months, so I get it. But if there's anything you can say about, like, here you brokered some sort of a partnership, which just sounds really cool, but like, can you tell me anything about, like, is it a partnership that's going to give you guys money? Like, is it a revenue partnership, or is it more of like, are they distributing for you?
So should I say more than that we increased we increased our projected revenue by 500K because of this partnership? That was part of the deal, is that we would be going into their business services?
Yes. So I meant it, because I reviewed this like an hour ago before we got started. I meant to say this before. Okay, so the projected revenue thing, right? This 500K, this needs to go first. This needs to be the very first thing you say. So something like increased projected revenue for company by 500K. And then also tell me, if it's a brand new company, you might not have this number, but if it's been in existence for a few years, like, what % growth does that represent? Or what % of the total would that represent?
Sure.
Because for a huge company like one of your earlier employers, 500K is, that's couch change. But for a small company, 500K, it could be life changing. So don't only put it first, but tell me what percentage that is, and then say by leading the expansion or by brokering a partnership, and then telling me all that stuff.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Also, I'm not sure what PMO stands for. Project management
office, like basically how a company manages their project implementation.
I wonder if you need room, you could probably summarize this by just saying something like helping clients to manage their enterprise architecture, to manage their IT processes or something like that. I don't know what if by enterprise architecture you mean like servers.
I mean, they bring in Microsoft 365 or some large enterprise architecture service. We help manage that end-to-end delivery. So
it's IT stuff at the end of the day. So if you had to summarize this, you could say something like, to find potential clients for our IT implementation offering, or something like that, right? Because the PMO, agile, that's not as important to me as the fact that you've increased revenue by 500K.
Sure.
Because again, like, just like with the last person, they're not hiring you to come in and be their agile PMO enterprise person. They're not hiring you to work in their IT group, so they don't need to know that you do agile stuff.
Okay.
They're right. They want to see your business stuff. And then for the Big Brothers Big Sisters, super quick, you have here, Big Brothers. It's such a well-known thing. You don't need to explain what they do.
Sure.
And if you really wanted to, you could almost even, you don't have to phrase this or format it as if though it were a job. You could say something like, Big Brother since 5/19, and then my little passed all of his classes for the first time in high school.
Okay.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, so that way you can save a little bit of space.
Sure.
If needed. Okay. So moving on, if you happen to have room, and I know that you're also, I think, submitting an application today, so I don't want to I don't want to throw like formally changes at you, but if you can't fit it in the resume, that's great. But in the application form itself, where you list extracurricular activities, I would love to know anything you did as the Student Engineers Council CFO and leader of the career fair. Ideally, you could fit something in the resume to grab my attention about this, but if not, you can definitely put it in the application form. Something about, like, did you do any, like, how big of a budget were you managing? Or the career fair, we used to only attract 10 employers per year, but I led the career fair and we attracted 20 employers, right? Or anything like that, like 85%, and then normally only 30% of kids have jobs by their junior year. But when I was in charge of the career fair, 80% got hired. Anything like that to show, if possible, it's a big ask, I know, but if you did anything to sort of elevate that career fair or elevate the Student Engineers Council, I would love to see some quantification behind it.
Okay, yeah, and I do, once again, I do that in my application just because I attempted to put it here, but I actually I had a decent amount of accomplishments, which I guess is a good thing, and it ended up pushing my resume to 2 pages, and I tried to reduce that.
Great, okay, perfect. So yeah, even if it means cutting, excuse me, cutting a little bit of this, right, so sort of smushing some of this together and really condensing it, you might want to put it here because again, they're probably gonna pull up the resume first and then dig into the details and those little boxes and then the details in the essays.
Okay.
So moving up, internships and co-ops. So normally I would say to some people like, internships, it's so ancient history. Like you don't have to really like draw out so much. Maybe you could put them all on one line. Like sometimes I'm not, for you, I want you to keep this, but for some other people, because people who might be watching this who don't have quite your background, for other people, if you did have several internships in college, you might, first of all, if they're not related to your long-term career vision, you can just leave them off. But if they are related or you want them to know, you can put them all on one line. You can just say like internships at, internships at JP Morgan, Google, and Netflix, right? And then just sort of, you don't have to go into a lot more detail beyond that because in the eyes of most admissions officers, internships are cool, but they're also sort of ancient history. Now, in your case, I want you to leave them on because you did graduate 3 years ago. So you're at like kind of the right age, a smidgen on maybe the youngish side. So I do want those co-ops in there because the co-op will show that you actually have more quote unquote work experience than might be originally guessed simply looking at your graduation date, right? Because the co-op means that you're doing some pretty heavy work while you were studying. So in your case, I'm going to have you leave them in and have them each be separate lines instead of just like being like, yeah, just smush them together so they'll get the point. Okay, so then moving up to then you went to work at a big chemical company for about a year. And this was a case where innovation project engineer. Now for this one, digital procedures, you were not doing anything with VR here.
I did lead a virtual reality project. Yes, that was one of my many innovation projects. I guess that was kind of the issue I had as I led so many different projects that I was trying to focus on something other than VR because I did VR in my next role as well. So
I would argue the opposite. I would argue since VR is a big part of your current role and it's a big part of your ultimate career vision, by putting it here as well, you're establishing your expertise in it. So on the contrary, because you want to do it and because you're doing it now, all the more reason to talk about it here. So what I would say here is, look, originally this line here, I conceptualized and implemented digital solutions. I mean, 80% of people applying to business school could write a line that says, I conceptualized and implemented digital solutions, right? Whether they work for an accounting firm or an advertising firm, or like most people are implementing digital solutions. So instead, I want this to be something like led or co-led, 12 different innovations, because you said you have so many that you couldn't fit them. Great, so let's summarize them here and then go into details. Innovation projects spanning VR, something else, and something else.
Okay.
Right, so that way you highlight the key parts. And then what you could do is you could then list out the main important ones. I would actually make the VR one the first one that you then elaborate on in a second bullet point. You could also then use you could also then use a sub bullet point. Hold on, can I do that? Oh, it's not letting me do it. I just hit, I don't know. I'm hitting the tab button to try to get it to move this next bullet point in a little, but something is weird and it's not happening. But if you wanted to, you could put like the 12 projects or whatever it was as like the main umbrella bullet and then have little indented bullets underneath it to say, VR project to do blah, 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 blah in our warehouses, and then some other project to do blah, 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 blah with supply chain. So that way it's visually clear that they're all under that umbrella of 12, but it's not strictly necessary. Sure. So then, yeah, and give me a sense also when you say things like I collaborated with this team, I want more specifics like led a team of 6, right? Sure. Or coordinated a team of 8 to do whatever. And then whenever you have things here like I increased flexibility for site logistics, that could mean so many things. So to the extent that you could make that a lot more concrete in my head, and I don't mean concrete by throwing a lot of jargon at me, but something like, 12%, reduced fuel costs by 15% or something like that I can wrap my head around in an easy way. And then here, similar to the last person, and also similar to increasing revenue by 500K. I'm a really big fan of starting the bullet point with the wow factor instead of waiting to the end to be like, surprise, I did something cool. So the 1 million savings, I would say saved 1 million per year. And then tell me what percentage that was of that particular division or what that represented, because this was a really big chemical company. So 1 million in savings for them might not be that big of a deal, but maybe for your specific division, it was a very big deal, right?
Sure.
So give me that sort of percentage. Yeah, and then obviously, like I'm going through now and I'm like making all these changes, and so it's getting messy, but you can do it. And so same thing here with the 500K in annual savings, right? Save $500,000 a year, whatever percentage that is for the railway division, by introducing robotics to clean things more efficiently.
Okay.
And just go on from there. And if you have to sort of leave it at that, I think that's fine. And then moving on to your current experience. So what we really need here is, because you are doing basically 2 jobs at once, is before you even get into the bullet points, I need something here that is something like, you know, currently managing, you know, 2 divisions or projects or 2 main initiatives, you know, so that way it's clear, right? Initiatives. Supply, and my typing is going to be terrible because I'm trying to type and think and do supply chain for North America. And then maybe you can tell me like how big that is in terms of, you know, millions or billions of dollars. And also simultaneously, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to spell this, leading our, you know, our forays into using VR to, you know, whatever, revolutionize how we do stuff. So then that way it's immediately clear, because originally I was like, oh, is his job, is it like doing VR within supply chain? And so I originally wrote this comment, like when I was first going over this, you know, if your main responsibility is VR and AR and stuff, that sounds pretty sexy. That's a lot sexier than supply chain. So I was like, point it out more. Like I was going to tell you to like put here instead of supply chain engineer, I was going to have you put something like VR, you know, manager, VR innovations for supply chain. But since you're doing both jobs, I do think that it's worth it, even if it means you have to cut other stuff, remove some details from some of the other bullet points. I'm fine with that sacrifice, because I think it's so important to convey to them I'm doing kind of 2 jobs at once.
Okay.
And one is a really big job and the other one is maybe smaller, but it's really sexy because it's a VR.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I tried to do that because technically, I guess technically I have 3 jobs. So that's what I listed out here is that I supervise immersive technologies, which VR is under, but then I also manage the export fleet. And then I'm also a technical consultant for our 130 customers in North and South America. So, and I definitely expand on that in my, but it was hard to fit all into one bullet point.
Well, then that's why we're not gonna put it in a bullet point, but we are gonna say currently managing 3 major initiatives: supply chain for North America, and however big that is, or whatever the sort of thing you can claim, exporting to whatever 23 countries. I'm making this up, or anything to sort of give me a sense of like how big that is, and also simultaneously leading our forays into VR. Blah blah blah.
Okay.
So then that way it's really clear to me, like, oh, he's got 3 different things. Yeah, and the reason I was confused is because that first bullet point was I'm in charge of looking at all the immersive. You started with immersive technology, so I was like, oh, so is he primarily a VR guy?
Sure.
And so you might want to put. I mean, I like the immersive things first though, because the VR is part of. If your career vision were something else, I'd say, well, maybe we put the VR stuff piece to the side. Some other comments that I'm going to make real quick is like you have here, like I deployed a 6-pillar initiative called the Supply Chain Toolkit. And then down here you have, oh, I was the lead for Project Monarch. Like the names of the projects don't really matter so much to me because I don't work in your company. So I'm not going to be like, oh, Project Monarch, I've heard of that. That's a big deal. They're not going to know. So I think it's just easier to just say like, I created and deployed an initiative that's going to save us $35 million.
Okay.
By doing blah, 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 right? You know, saving, retained 3 major accounts, 35 million in revenue. Tell me again, like, is that a lot or a little by giving me some sort of percentage by creating and deploying a multifaceted initiative that disrupted supply chain norms, and then just kind of, you can sort of leave it at that.
Sure.
Yeah, I love the virtual reality training program. That's why it's almost like, if that is your career vision, you might even want to put that, you know what, let's alternate it. Let's do, yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard because you do have these different things. My gut, my tummy would say maybe put the VR stuff first, because, that is the career that you want to go. So you're establishing yourself as, I'm Mr. VR. So
Sure.
when you read in my essay that I want to go into VR, I'm not crazy. Like,
Sure.
I really know what I'm talking about. Okay. And yeah, stuff like you don't need to tell me that high potential means hypo employee.
Sure.
Like, these internal terms are not really that important. And then, so for the hypo thing, just instead of saying like, oh, this let me talk to the CEO, which is great, I mean, about my future in the company. Well, but you're about to leave the company to go to business school, right? So the future of the company doesn't really matter. But instead, I'd rather know, like, how did you get, how or why? Like, the High Potential Employee Award, only given to 3 out of 200 employees per year.
Sure. And that one, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, came to fruition a week ago. So I just found out a lot more of the, a lot more of the backing behind it today, actually. So I'll be able to update a little bit more about what that means.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So tell me why you were selected, and not, I got to have lunch with the CEO or whatever.
Sure. Yep.
All right. Okay. So now moving on to our unicorn Indian engineer. I hope you don't get offended, but you're working for a company right now. I was trying to, for the sake of anonymity, not disclose what it is, but it's a company that is still a big company today, but was a super big company like 7 years ago or so. And now they're still a big company, but they're not quite so big. So I refer to them as fading unicorn. Just because I was like, what, I don't know what else. So if you've been listening to what I've said so far with the other two folks, the exact same thing here, that in terms of moving that impact to the front, and number one, and number two, contextualizing it for me. So I would like for this bullet point to start with saved,
right,
75K, and then tell me what that is, either as a percentage or whatever, by by optimizing, because something like ideated and implemented solutions is also pretty generic, right? Like, I ideate and implement solutions for my clients. My son ideates and implements solutions for his teachers. So I'd rather have to be more specific with, like, by identifying, identifying and fixing or optimizing, long-standing issues, instead of long-standing issues with traffic attribution. I'd love for this to be more like, by realizing that traffic, that our retail, stores were, we thought our retail stores were making more money than they were, or we thought that Google Ads was driving more revenue than it was, and it actually wasn't, right? Obviously, you would phrase it a little bit more elegantly than that. But if you can tell me something that I can wrap my head around, don't go too technical. Don't start saying like, well, I ran an R-squared analysis using, no. But if you do say something like, we were spending too much money on Facebook ads, right? Or something like that. Like, I saved us a lot of money because I figured out that we thought Facebook was driving a lot more revenue for us than they were, right? So,
that is what you just put is precisely what the issue is, and not Facebook. But the thing is, I was not sure on how to blur the lines, like where to draw the line between saying exactly what the issue is, because you again have company confidentiality, and also how to put my point across. So okay, that's why I just put it as traffic.
So you don't have to tell me which platform it was, but you can say, like, by basically rephrasing it as, by figuring out that one of our, that an advertiser that we were paying wasn't really delivering. So you don't have to tell me what the advertising platform was, but I think just sort of putting it more in plain English, so that someone, because a lot of admissions officers, basically none of them have data science or engineering backgrounds. A a lot of them have human resources backgrounds or businessy backgrounds, or they themselves went to business school. So you need to put it, you need enough detail so that I can picture it, but not technical details. So that I can, because if it's just like I led some initiative to improve something, it's like, well, okay, but I implemented solutions. Like, all right, well, I planted a plant in my garden yesterday, and I'm implementing a solution that hope that it doesn't die. Like, it's very vague. So I'd rather have this, be more specific in that sense. And so what I like about it too is that it shows you sort of influencing the marketing organization, even though your title is software development engineer. So I would be like, oh, this guy's just a techie. Like, he doesn't understand. He probably doesn't really know business. No, because you've been working with the market. This is a marketing issue, right? The marketing budget was being spent inefficiently, and you helped save it. So you've actually had an impact on the bottom line of the business, which business school is an important thing to note. So then moving on to this next one again, oops, whoa, I don't know what just happened there. So starting again with like, helped improve revenue by whatever, by onboarding transactions of a new payments platform. That is, I think that's another one where you can say like, by allowing our customers to use PayPal or something like that, and which expanded our ability to collect revenues from people. And then here you had the infrastructure to the cloud. So for something like a cloud migration, right? I, as a business school type, I know why that's important, sort of. Like, I know it has something to do with saving costs, maybe, and improving reliability, kind of. But, I might not know a whole lot. So I would much rather have this bullet point say something like, saved, if this cloud migration is going to lead to an increase in savings, can you quantify what those savings are? Or at least say something like, I'm saving the company a lot of money by migrating to the cloud, which is less expensive.
That is precisely the point, Maria. But the thing is, it's a long-term saving, so we're not exactly sure on how much we'll be saving right now. So that's why, since I'm not sure of the exact numbers, I thought let's not put it there.
That's fine, but you can at least say that you're going to save money.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Saving company money in the long term by, migrating from our expensive in-house servers to a cloud solution. And in terms of the office hours live demonstration, I think you could just say you could sort of summarize the office hours live demonstrations and mentored. You could just say, trained 5 non-data engineers, to upskill, and manage the system or whatever it is, right? So you don't have to tell me like all the different ways in which you trained them and whether or not they were drafted into the assignment or they volunteered for the assignment. That detail is not really that important. What's important is that these were people who didn't understand data and you taught them to understand it. Which is a good skill to have because it shows that you have people skills. It shows that you can explain technical things to non-technical audiences. So I want the point to stay in. I just want it to be phrased a little bit more, again, more like plain English, more plain English. And then similar to the last person, when you received the Spot Award for your contributions, like you're just summarizing the 2 projects you just told me about for my contributions in the cloud migration and traffic attributions. Like, well, presumably that's, if that's the 2 big things you do, then that's what you would have won the Spot Award for. So I would much rather know, because it's kind of obvious that's probably what you won them for. But if possible, awarded to only 3 out of 200 people per quarter or anything like that to let me know. Because I remember I was once, a couple years ago, I was in a session with a Wharton AdCom person. And he said about Deloitte, like Deloitte has something called like the Applause Award. And he was like, those of you who are admissions, it was a session specifically for admissions consultants. And he was like, admissions consultants, if you have clients from Deloitte, for example, and they won 17 Applause Awards, don't have them, like, we know what the Applause Award is. We know it's actually not, it's nice, but it's not that big of a deal. So please don't have them brag about the stupid applause. He didn't use the word stupid. That was me editorializing. Don't have them brag about the Applause Award because we know that everyone gets an applause award every day, right? So that's why I want, if you're going to mention the award, tell me why it's a big deal.
Okay. Fine. Yes.
And then before this, you were at a major retailer as a software engineer. You know, I liaise with stakeholders from 7 countries. How many stakeholders? Can you give me a number? You could add that number because hopefully it was a number more than 7.
Yeah.
And then again, to solve business problems, I would much rather have a little bit more. If you could summarize here maybe by saying like, to identify issues with our warehousing and improve something or other, you know. Or you could just say, I liaise with stakeholders from 7 countries on big data infrastructure, and then you go on to other things. But to solve business problems is sort of generic.
Right.
And then also this line here of like, I engage with the heads of software development and I gave them regular updates. Most people in any job have to give regular updates to their boss.
Okay.
For the right? No matter what you're doing, you know, my husband's a CFO and he has to give regular updates to his boss, and the people who work for him have to give regular updates to him. So I thought it's probably pretty implicit that somewhere along the line you had a boss and somewhere along the line you had to give updates to that boss or bosses. So I think we can just delete that line completely. I don't know why that didn't. Oh, there's some sort of weird box here. Sorry, I can't complete, but you can delete it on your own. And then similarly here, like this is another case where, as we've said before, right? Like start off with, I helped us save $750,000, which represents an X percentage improvement over the past 2 years by coming up with, when you said development of solutions, like it's funny, it's a little bit funny because here, like development, okay, let me zoom in. Development of solutions is too generic, and yet taxonomies and hierarchies is too specific.
Okay.
So you're like, girl, make up your mind. No, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, I made a solution is a little too like, what does that mean? And yet taxonomy and hierarchy, I'm like, oh my God, what does that mean? It's two different what does that means, but they're in different ends of the confusion spectrum. So yeah, okay. So I think you get the point. And wherever you can, like you can say, I facilitated efficient reporting. That's awesome. But could you also add something like a little bit more detail, like what did that efficient reporting mean to the business at the end of the day, right? Okay. You know, allowing, you know, the ideal with efficient reporting is that it either lets the company save money on personnel costs because they don't need to hire as many people, or it lets them make decisions faster, right? If you have more, if it used to take 3 weeks to get that report and now it takes 20 minutes, if I'm a manager of a company, I can do a lot more with that data faster. So maybe say something like, to evaluate product and store performance and make decisions more quickly. Same thing here. The data quality issues, I put it at the beginning. I improved data quality issues by 42%. But tell me a little bit more. I don't even really know what data. I can sort of guess what data quality might mean, but it said you could just say something like, let's say it was a grocery store or a sporting goods store, right? Helped us identify, you know, sporting goods were being mischaracterized in the system, which was making decision-making difficult. So like, instead of just saying, well, the data was bad, like, can you put it in any sort of plain English so that I, as a non-technical person, not working for your company, can get it? Can say, oh yeah, I get it. We were selling running shoes and the running shoes were misclassified. And that's why I helped save.
I agree with this, but the thing is, I guess data quality is quite large. So I'm not sure how to, bucket it into something.
Yeah. So how would you describe it to me? What do you mean when you say data quality? What does that mean?
Right. So sometimes what happens is now in cases where there are descriptions of some goods, right? So since I was working at Thailand, what happens is instead of sending English descriptions, we get the local language descriptions. That is one sort of thing. So at places where you're supposed to put prices in, you get some sort of you get a date, stuff like that. Now, you get a date. Now instead of say $500,000, you might get 500,000 pounds.
Right.
So stuff like that. So I didn't know how to bracket those things.
Yeah. So it would be something like, by standardizing maybe something like entry forms, which which were previously something like by standardizing entry forms
in compliant formats.
I don't care that it's a compliant format. I being a business school, I don't care that it's compliant or not. I just care that it helped people in the business do their job better. By standardizing entry forms, which were previously filled with errors due to mistakes in translation between Thai and English. Right. That might not, that what I just did right there might not be the thing that you go with, but at least I'm trying to move towards an explanation.
Got it.
You know, and obviously like, yeah, now that I'm looking at what I just wrote, I'm like, oh, Maria, you could have done a better job with that. But given where we are and given that this is, you know, an online thing that we're doing fast, but this is more, this is not what you should submit, but it's closer to where you need to go in terms of explaining like, oh, and then this could be a great example. If you think that this is one of your biggest impacts that you've made, this can be a great candidate for an essay where you do bring out those errors and just say something like, imagine, like, I don't speak Thai. So if I see a form that has all these headings in Thai, I'm just going to guess, like maybe the price goes here, maybe the price should be in baht or pounds or US dollars, right? So like you can really help in the essay. Should this be an example you talk about, you can set the stage there.
Right.
Okay. So here you have this customer analytics platform, and then you give me whatever their internal acronym is. I don't really care what the internal acronym is. Yeah, so this was another one where like, wow, you had this analytics platform and there were 10 million people who were in the customer loyalty program, and stupid GDPR, we had to make sure. Is there any way, again, like, because you did this work, what was the impact to the business? So with GDPR, I think like if you're not GDPR compliant, you can get fined or something. Can the EU government fine? Yeah, is that it?
Yep.
Okay, so then say something like along the lines of prevented company from being fined by the EU by ensuring that we were GDPR, by ensuring that 10 million client accounts were GDPR compliant.
Right. The actual purpose of this though was to send out personalized promotions to various customers.
Okay, then phrase it that way, right? If improved relevance of marketing messaging, of email marketing by analyzing 10 million customers and segmenting them into relevant groups.
Right.
Oh, I see. Now I just reread this again. You're saying the data was GDPR. I thought you were saying that the analysis had to do with GDPR.
No.
But you were simply saying, see, this is a detail that really doesn't matter. Like, why do I care if the data was GDPR compliant or not? Data is data. Like, I just want to know these were customers. We had 10 million customers sitting in a database and they were all getting the same email, and that was not good. Right. Because they all had very different. So the fact that it was GDPR, do you see how like you're throwing in occasionally these little details that are not? If you were applying for another job, this is something I say a lot in ApplicantLab. This is not the same resume you're going to use to apply for a job. If you were applying for a job at a retailer, at a European-based retailer, then saying like, hey, I know how to work with GDPR compliant data, that's a big deal. But that's not the job you're applying for. When you're applying to business school, you're applying for a different quote unquote job. Right. So that's why some of these details are not that that important. So similarly here with the proof of concepts, again, tell me we replaced 70% of the code base, we reduced the overall runtime, again, enabled the company to make decisions faster or to analyze its warehouses faster by replacing 70% of the legacy code with something that was much better. You don't, down here, moving down to your college stuff, you don't need to tell me what classes you took, because I'm gonna, as an admissions officer, I'm gonna have your, number one, I'm gonna have your transcript. Number two, the fact that your BTech was in information technology, I can pretty much guess what a lot of your classes were, right? If you had majored in poetry and you also happened to have taken classes in data, okay, maybe that's worth pointing out, like, oh, this person actually knows, but in your case, it's not really necessary. And you had this thing about the face and emotion recognition system, totally cool. But what did it go anywhere? Like you can leave it in, I guess, but like, did this project go anywhere, or was it going to improve what exactly?
So I didn't like I kind of abandoned it midway after after completing this. So the purpose of this was to serve as an in-house security system wherein you can you can upload, you can see who's coming in, who's going out of your house, and check if there are any burglars coming in and stuff like that. So that was the purpose of doing this. I ultimately wanted to put this in the cloud, but it just it just hit a brick wall, I guess.
Yeah. So let's just make this one line. Developed a face and emotion recognition system for a digital security system with 83% accuracy. And then if you happen to know, like, what's the usual accuracy with a webcam?
It's pretty high, but the thing is, I tested it on my laptop, my hardware, my 4 GB RAM laptop, which could only process so much. So
Right.
On that, it was 83%. But since I didn't have access to superior computing, I couldn't test it. I couldn't test how the algorithm works over there.
Got it. So what I would say is, and just leave it like this if that's all you know. But if you happen to know, like, the other system that I ran on my computer only had a 32% accuracy rate, or like, you know, versus, you could put something like versus, 72% or something. And then you don't have to explain it a lot, because if I see this and I invite you to interview and I think it's interesting, I might be like, so explain to me, what do you mean by 72%? And then you can say, well, I was working on this laptop that was 20 years old and it only had like 1 RAM of data. And you know what I mean? And then you can sort of build the story from there.
Right.
Okay, moving on. I know Abhijit's probably freaking out because I know we ran over. Sorry, Abhijit. So for this one here with the medical checkups, I would love some more specificity, like security guards, domestic helpers, and drivers. Like, was it 3 people or was it 40 people? Was it 300 people? I don't know how many people you helped. And if you could also try to estimate like the total value of donated, because you had these doctors do, I'm presuming they did free or low cost
Free
checkups. Okay, free. So if you can say something like, giving them the equivalence of $3,000 of free medical care.
Okay.
Or something like that to sort of, but I'm much more, the one number I do want to know is how many people, because
it's around, it's been something which we've been doing as a family from childhood, since I've been doing that for a while. So I don't have a number actually.
Also, can you say, like, for past 10 years have helped over 100 laborers get free medical checkups? Can you estimate it some way like that? I'm asking sort of rhetorically, right? So like you could probably put it some way like that, but you could also say how long you've been doing it, right? Because now with COVID, a lot of people are suddenly jumping into doing COVID volunteering, and it's like, oh, you've been doing it for a month. So based on this description, I don't know if you've been doing it for a month or if you've been doing it for 10 years. So I would, you can get rid of like the preliminary diagnosis of a potential problem. Just say like free medical care.
Okay.
That's fine. And then this is so funny because you went to the Municipal Institute of Technology in the town of Municipal, India. When you first said MIT, it took me a split second because I thought of my MIT in my country. And and also I would do, for these sort of college activities, put these underneath college.
Okay.
So that way it's clear that you were doing these things while you were in college and you were juggling classwork. So then that way it's sort of, it all gets grouped together. Once again, start the bullet point here with, I raised 600,000 rupees. Put it in US dollars if you're applying to US programs. And since I don't know if 600,000 rupees is a lot or a little, if it was better than the previous year, tell me by what percentage it was better than the previous year.
So I introduced a 20% revenue, but 600,000 in US dollars is not that big. But
right. Yeah, it's like, yeah. I get it, but I'm just saying, like, for what you can do is, move it to the front, contextualize it, and it'll be more powerful. And then finally down here, you did something which a lot of people do in their resumes. You have what I call an orphaned word, right? Since every line in the resume counts, it's so precious. I want everyone on this webinar to look out at their resumes and find lines where it goes over by 1 or 2 words, because that's an indicator for you that there's gotta be a way for you to get it on the one line. Or to, like, it drives me crazy that, like, every line is so precious. And this here down here is an example of an entire line being sacrificed just to convey one word, the word time, right? So, you could here, I would say, to socialize and have fun. There you go, done. So for anyone, when you're looking at your own resume, ask yourself, like, do I have any orphans? And am I sacrificing an entire line of space for a word that's not really adding that much value? Okay, so that is everything. I know, Abhijit, we ran over, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and go back to the normal. Am I back? Oh, I think I'm back. Okay, I'm back. All right, guys. Well, so I hope that this was useful for all of you. I know it was only about 20 minutes for each person, but I hope that at least in those 20 minutes, I was able to convey some good takeaways. I'll send you back after this, or I'll send it to Abhijit or whatever. I'll send you back your files with, like, the little changes that I made for whatever it's worth. And Brendan and Amit, I know you guys are submitting today, so I will do that right now because I know you're in a hurry in case you do want to implement any of these changes. And yeah, so good luck, everyone. Because I did run over, I apologize for that. We won't have time for questions today, but if you give this video a big thumbs up and a like, GMAT Club will know that you guys like me and they will ask me to come back and I can do this again. And next time we'll only do maybe 2 people, so that way we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. All right, thanks everyone, and best of luck, everyone, with your application processes. Bye-bye.